This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35 or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. Welcome to Linux in Laws, Season 1, Episode 87. Martin, how are things in the Empire? Or what used to be the Empire, anyway?
It's good. Well, Empire.
Yes.
Do you ever have? No, we didn't. No. It's not Empire. We didn't have an emperor or an empress. You're completely mistaken.
Okay.
Unless you're talking about Japan or something.
What is now known as Little Britain, which used to be Great Britain.
Uh-huh.
And of course, that's a reference to a very good TV series ages ago.
Yeah, that's quite amusing.
Can you recall this?
Oh, it's going back a few years, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Martin, and I thought I was old. Apparently I'm not.
Got to be, that's for 25 years, maybe, something like that, if not more.
Early 2000s, late 90s, yes. Details may have up in the show notes, people. But it's ancient. It's a little bit on the cynical as in dark side.
Yeah, I wonder how this works with people who are not familiar with the UK.
Martin,
the humour.
It won't.
Okay. Right.
Because if you don't like puns being taken at disabled people and so forth, people don't watch this. Seriously, don't. Because you might get offended very easily. And it's not for the faint-hearted, let's put it this way.
That's not that bad. Yeah.
Very
Political
much
correctness
like
is not present.
No. Political correctness would be on the opposite side of the exactly. It doesn't, of course, reflect actually, it would be reflecting the UK government at the time. No, maybe I'm wrong. UK government, if you're listening, pay attention.
Yeah, and sponsor us. Yeah.
Martin, glad that we're still on the explicit side of things, just in case, before the police gets to us. But this is not about politics or TV shows, where which is not the main focus, but rather about something. What are we talking about today, Martin? Open source hardware, if I'm not completely mistaken, right?
Oh, is that the general? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, that was probably a little bit quick. So for the slightly impaired people, open source hardware. And of course, something called RISC-V comes to mind, and that would be the topic of today's episode. So if you are offended with open source hardware, this episode is something you don't want to listen to. Just in case, just to get this out of the way. Because this is all about sharing ideas and how to contribute to the overall movement in terms of, it's probably fair to say that up to now, hardware has been mostly proprietary, and the project, as in RISC-V, is exactly trying to change this.
Okay.
In the true spirit of open source and free libre and open source software.
So, okay, interesting. So, open source software, obviously, that is pretty straightforward, right? We have code that is available and so on and so on.
Yes.
What about, how does this work with hardware then?
Before we go into that level of detail, Martin,
detail. It's quite a fundamental question, actually.
And bore the people with the inner details, we should probably talk about where actually this whole reduced instruction set notion comes from. The RISC-V project essentially is an example of the notion of what at its very core, the open source movement, I'm almost tempted to say, is all about leaving the software space and entering the hardware space. But as I said, details in a minute, once we have covered the historical background
Okay.
Martin. What do you know about reduced instruction set computing?
Well, they are sort of contrary to complex instruction sets.
Very good. Okay.
And as the name says,
let's go back
there is
to
a reduced set of instructions. But yeah, I think one of the main principles I remember was that it executes in one clock tick or something. That's one thing.
Very good. Okay, let's go back to the 1700s and let's cover an architecture called the.
It's a very reduced set of instructions.
And let's cover something called the Babbage Analytical Machine. Martin, given the fact that you were around at the time, does that ring any bell?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's quite famous.
So tell us all about it.
Well, it's like a mechanical computer thingy.
Yes.
Well, which is invented by Babbage, right? That's where I got the name from. I don't remember much other details. But...
Very, very much so, yes. And the way it worked, and Martin, this is spot on, essentially with every movement of this mechanical clockwork-like thing, you actually did one operation. And that's exactly what you were referring to earlier on.
Right, yes, makes sense. Yeah.
Because that's exactly how RISC, as in reduced instruction set computers, work pretty much at their very core. But okay, let's leave the Babbage realm and let's actually go to the foundation of reduced instruction set computers that takes us back to the 70s. Martin, given the fact that you were
70s.
you were able to drive a car early 60s, what can you remember about the 70s?
The 70s was flared trousers and the Bee Gees. What else was in the 70s?
Keep going. I think you met
Beatles? No, Beatles is more 60s, really, isn't it?
You met your second wife in the 70s, no?
70s? No.
Keep talking.
70s, I was still in primary and secondary school, actually.
You were able to marry then? That's interesting.
I don't expect so. Yeah. Okay. Well, mind you, they in the Middle Ages, to be honest.
Maybe it was different in the Netherlands. Anyway. Okay.
Oh, the history stuff. Yes. Okay. 70s. IBM.
Now,
IBM.
Exactly.
IBM built everything really back then. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Funny enough, IBM released their primary mainframe architectures, which haven't changed that much on the surface since the 60s, I'm tempted to say, with the main difference probably, or with the main exception rather, that they did their first hypervisor in 1972 called VM, funny enough, as in virtual machines.
Good name, yeah.
Exactly, but at the time, somebody in New York, where they were kind of headquartered, or Solara, I think, anyway, took a look, and that was kind of mid-70s, if not mistaken, took a look at typical mainframe workloads. You were talking at that stage about the 360s, 370s of the world, as in kind of room-filling machines, very expensive, but
tapes. Okay.
Yes, but with a 31-bit, I think, architecture.
But the details... in the 70s? No.
Exactly. Yeah, where they mainframes are still pretty much advanced regarding their specific point in time. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But the thing is that they had this idea of building a telephone switch in the 70s that would be able to handle, details may or may not be in the show notes, about 300,000 calls per second. Don't quote me on the numbers. Orders from magnitude might be different. But the bottom line is actually that when they analyzed the current architecture, as in 370, I think it was at the time, or 360, they came up with the notion that this could only handle a fraction of the calls required. So they took a look at...
That's probably because they weren't running Erlang, wasn't it? Really?
They probably ran some sort of COBOL on these machines.
Yes.
Anyway, no, and the idea was basically to accelerate the mainframes to that level that they would be able to build that switch. But in order to do that, they would have to reduce the then current CISC, as in complex instruction set computers, complex instruction set computer, which was the 370, 360 of the time. So what the people at IBM did is they took a look at what the workload actually consists of that is executed by the typical mainframe CPU at the time. And they came up with the conclusion that only about 10% of the overall instruction set was used, in terms of that the compiler writing people only took advantage of about 10% of the overall CPU instructions at their disposal. So the idea was, why not make a complex machine less complex in terms of put more power to the hardware? Because essentially what this complex instruction set computers did, the first time when you booted them up, they load something called a microcode interpreter. This microcode told the central processing unit how to interpret single CPU instructions. So it's essentially taking CPU instructions from a CISC architecture and then executing them in a couple of internal steps. And the idea that the people had in order to accelerate these mainframe computers was actually hardwire these internal instructions in terms of in hardware and do away with the microcode, because that adds another layer of complexity that slows down the machine. Hence, the project 801 was born. Fortunately, unfortunately, whatever you will call it, this switch idea was cancelled, as in the corresponding project was cancelled. But IBM maintained the project name ROMP for this. And any subsequent RISC architecture in terms of the RTPC, the 6150, and subsequently the P series still go back to that particular CPU architecture as in reduced instruction set. Anybody listening from IBM, if you want to know more, if you want to hear more IBM acronyms being mentioned on the show,
more.
Exactly.
Yes.
The email address is sponsor@linuxinlaws.eu. Just in case. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and to continue this story, when your beloved BBC, Martin, was looking for a home computer architecture in the kind of mid-80s, they turned to a company called Archon RISC Machines.
Yes.
Exactly. Archon RISC Machines at the time, I don't think, had something suitable. So they took a look at what was out there at the time. They took a look at
Acorn, you mean, but yeah, that's okay.
Exactly. They took a look at 6502, they took a look at 6809, all the rest of them, but came up with the conclusion that this was something that they couldn't use, and they did their own thing. So they produced an initial design of something called an ARM processor. And as we all know, the rest is pretty much history. Because
everything is history, really. That's how it works. with
well
time.
Spotted, yes, well spotted, man. So at some stage, they decided, okay, a home computer is great, but we can do more. So at some stage, they decided that selling designs in contrast to making actual CPUs is much more lucrative. So the idea, and that was kind of late 80s, early 90s, maybe mid-90s, was to come up with designs for CPUs that were lightning fast and had a very low power consumption. That's exactly something you need if you want to build a tablet, or if you want to build the hardware foundation for a tablet or a mobile phone. Hence the notion that about, I'm tempted to say 99.5% of all mobile phones run ARM architectures as an ARM CPUs, or CPUs, hardware, that is based on ARM SoCs. Hence this craze about the stock market price of ARM shares and all the rest of it, because that company has been really going through the roof. Never mind, I think they were quiet a couple of years back, or there was discussion about them being quiet a couple of years back.
That didn't go ahead.
Details may have not been in the show notes, but
anyway. I think NVIDIA tried to buy them, but I wasn't allowed.
Suffice it to say, they still make money, and quite a lot of it. And other RISC architectures are still around. MIPS probably being the most prominent example in the router space.
Okay.
MIPS, of course, going back to the original BSD project, as in sorry, not BSD, but rather University of California at Berkeley, because they came up with a corresponding CPU design called MIPS, as in MIPS, that is heavily used in routers, for example, all over the place, as in now. So if you take a look at any, Martin, what's your no, no, Martin, don't name me a favorite router producer. Details will be in the show notes.
They're
But
not
if you
sponsoring us.
no, they're not. But if you take a look at the router market, about I reckon my guess would be 60 to 70% of all routers on the planet run MIPS CPUs, as in use MIPS CPUs. So it's a reduced instruction set that is very much aimed, similar to ARM, at SoCs, as in embedded systems. As in systems on a chip that have typically built in one or two NRCs, as in network interface chips, plus a Wi-Fi SoC. That makes them ideal for any type of network gear. A Theros probably comes to mind with regards to the networking SoC that many routers use. But what does that have? But what does that have to do with open source hardware?
Well, you missed one out, right? This is where I actually know it from, which is Spark. Isn't that a RISC architecture as well?
Yes, Martin. So what do we know about Spark?
It was great. This is stuff that was kind of rock solid and super fast compared to your average x86 hardware at the time.
So what does Spark go back to? What does Spark go back to?
80s?
Yes, where does it come from?
From Sun?
Yes.
What is the question?
Very good. Who invented Spark?
Don't know. I just used it.
Who's one of the founders of
a company
called Sanford University?
Yes. No, hang on. I remember, who was this?
Hint, it's a German.
No.
Yes.
No, it's a California.
Yes, but it's still a German who invented Spark. He comes from Germany.
Not the company.
No, he actually comes from Bavaria, and he's still around. Yes, and Google used to owe him $100,000, which after floating turned into a couple of trillion, I suppose. You don't know the story. Okay,
no.
here's a little bit of.
Oh, Andy Bechtolsheim.
Yes, Martin, very good.
Yes.
Andrew von Bechtolsheim actually, did a PhD thesis on how to produce power-saving RISC architectures. And that was subsequently turned into a company called SUN, Stanford University Network, because the idea at the time was actually to produce hardware that would be ideal for running distributed algorithms, as in turn the network into the computer. But you're looking at early 80s, late 70s, that sort of thing.
Well, it was still very much around in the 90s and 2000s, and then it kind of
vanished.
It went into a decline, yes, for sure. Nothing to do with the Oracle acquisition.
No, I think Fujitsu sold his last Spark-based mainframe, 2018? I don't go up on the exact year, but Spark's dead. Let's put it this way. There's no more hardware, probably just for maintenance reasons, but at the end of the day, it's just legacy. And with shame, by the way.
I came across a customer the other day who was running some Spark machines still, so that was interesting.
Okay, probably running Solaris, right?
No, they were running. Yeah, actually, no, yes, they were running Solaris, but no. But what's funny was even
they're running
they had
what?
like 40 cores and stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, they were running what? I didn't.
No, they were running a Linux on it. Yeah.
Linux, yeah. Well, that's possible too. Although I reckon that machine was 30 years old?
I don't know. I didn't ask. But it was still running.
Okay.
I had quite a few of them.
Yeah. Fair enough. Doing probably some sort of core banking system that cannot be touched for legal reasons or all the rest of it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was still functional hardware, so they used it for lots of
Okay,
testing and development
interesting. And they were
activities.
running Linux on it. Wow. Okay. I think Spark was the second or third RISC-based architecture that entered the kernel back in the 90s when Linux was still young. But this is ancient lore.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
back to the issue at hand. RISC-V. Exactly.
RISC-V. Yes, RISC-V. So, are they the first to open up their architecture?
A couple of companies, and details will be in the show notes in terms of link to the project homepage. A couple of companies had this grand vision of, okay, we have been doing very much proprietary architecture up to now, but everybody will benefit if we, for a change, do an architecture that's open source. Needless to say, as with any open source project, the idea was actually that many people contribute, as in you have many eyeballs watching this. So make a mistake, that mistake can be easily corrected because, as I said, many pairs of eyeballs are taking a very close look. Because of the, let's put it this way, founders or founding companies of the project, and quite a few universities were playing part in this too, Berkeley probably being the most prominent one. If you take a close look at the so-called instructor set architecture, the RSA, it's not too far away from MIPS. And given the fact that MIPS originated from a Berkeley research project back in the 50s, I'm tempted to say, which of course historically totally wrong. No, it was much later anyway. But the overall idea of a reduced instructions computer was something that Berkeley heavily contributed to. And so the notion of taking portions of the overall design from the MIPS architecture and putting this into a freely available ISA was not too far off. And that's exactly what the RISC-V project did. Martin is, as usual, speechless. No surprise.
I thought there was more, but maybe
No.
Okay. Right. Yeah, well, clearly it's a, let's say, a sensible idea, similar to open sourcing software. Why not open source your hardware designs?
Absolutely. The trouble is, of course, that if you take a close look at the specification, and the details will be in the show notes, people, and word of advice, if you cannot get to sleep at night, the hardware specification of the RISC-V architecture is something really that will help to get you to that sleep that you have been so longing for. Because I'm almost going to say it's somewhat convoluted. It starts with the main differentiation of a threefold overall high-level separation. There is a user instruction set in terms of a set of instructions that you can run in user space. The usual adding, subtracting, and comparing stuff. Then you have something called the system space as an instructions that will allow you to fork a thread, has privileged instructions, all the rest of it, and then you have a third space called the machine, I think it's called the machine instruction set, that is typically aimed at hypervisors. And if memory serves correct, RISC-V, as in RISC-V, is the only architecture that had this from the word go. All the other instruction sets basically evolved over time, like the x86s, like the ARMs of the world, and tacked this on as they went along. But I reckon, and this is, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, this threefold separation is something that where you can clearly actually see the handwriting of academia on this. plus the fact that the core only defines a very minimal set of instructions. If you, for example, want to do floating point arithmetic, whether it's single precision, double precision, and all the rest of it, you have to go for something called extensions.
Okay.
And if you take a close look at how RISC-V architectures are named, and for example, the Wikipedia page is very educational on this, these names of the architectures have, on a good day, at least 10 letters and digits. On a bad day, you're probably looking at 32 or 65, 64 letters and digits, because what they do is they encode the word length, the number of extensions, whether you're looking at machine, system, or user space architectures and all the rest of it. And the documentation is likewise. Needless to say, that's exactly what you need if you want to sit down and take Verilog or some other tooling to do your first RISC-V based SoC, because it's all specified, and you actually this is also reflected in the governing architecture of the project. We have about 2 trillion, 4 billion, 5,347.8 subcommittees in charge of defining floating point arithmetic, system traps, exceptions, and all the rest of it. I'm joking. It's actually
Sounds
too
like
less.
fun. Yeah.
Yes. No, I mean, the website is pretty educational, because I think I stopped counting at about 30 or 32 subcommittees in terms of taking a look at very specific subsections of the architecture and how it's specified. So this is a CPU not done by a company, but rather by a committee. Now the thing is, basically, if you take a look at the adoption rate, which that is quite surprising, because you have all the usual suspects on the homepage sponsoring the bloody effort. And it starts with Google, Intel, and the usual, but it doesn't stop with cloud providers, hyperscalers, and all the rest of them. And sometimes some totally unknown companies that are simply participating in the effort.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I mean, it makes sense really for those companies to be involved, so they know what's happening from a competitive point of view as well, right? For an Intel or something like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And but you see, the beauty is that this is all open source licensed. So in contrast to, and I'm just naming one example, to ARM, as in what goes back to a company called RISC Machines, where if you want to build an ARM-based SoC, as in a system on a chip that is based on an ARM design, you have to pay them bloody license fees. With the RISC-V thing, you just clone the GitHub repo, I'm tempted to say, or you take a look at the specification, then build the SoC, as in taking the specification and coming up with a Verilog or what's called Verilog hardware design language, as in VHDL specification that you can simply pour into a fab, as in something that produces CPUs, and then basically you have your CPU and you have also the corresponding SoC architecture. So no license required, because it's essentially open source.
That's obviously.
So if
well,
you ever
it's quite useful. If you ever want to, as a small company, build some processors, then you can do this right with.
You just have to find a fab, as in somebody who is able to produce the silicon for you. And now the beauty is you don't have to go hunting for your couple of trillions of venture capital because of the license required for companies like ARM and all the rest of them. You can simply kind of take the SoC designs, pour it into a fab, and then run with it.
Hmm.
And this is what quite a few companies already have done, mostly in the embedded space. And I reckon this is something where this design by committee approach really shines, because you can really customize you can really customize the hell out of it. It's basically like a buffet. You choose your instruction set. As a type of instruction set, you choose your word length, you choose the number of instructions. What I think apparently isn't out there is actually the VHDL step, as in you have the specification, but I have not found something like a VHDL generator where you can actually take your design and put it into VHDL as in something that a fab would be able to understand in order to produce silicon. I reckon if you become a member of RISC-V, then that process might be available to you. I do not know.
Well, it sounds like you got your next venture lined up.
Yes, so people, if you are tired of
Exactly. Chris is going to build you something else.
So if you're tired of ARM architectures in your smartphone, please send mails to how to replace ARM at linuxinlaws.eu. If there are enough mails coming through, I might be tempted to create a Patreon, or what's called these. There's another service. It's called not Patreon. It's called another crowdfunding thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm tempted enough to put a crowdfunding campaign into place and to beat the hell out of Intel, ARM, and all the rest of them.
Excellent.
I mean, open source is all about change, right? So let's gather up these few $1 trillion that are required to teach the likes of Intel and ARM a lesson or two.
Indeed.
But jokes aside, people, although it's somewhat esoterical, fair enough, but this project really has the potential to, I wouldn't say replace ARM or the likes of Intel or the likes of AMD or whatever, because it's just too nascent at the moment, but they have captured a good deal of market share, especially in the embedded space already. And the more people, and needless to say, the more people contribute to the overall effort, the more pervasive, I reckon, is the word I'm looking for, it will get at the end of the day. Because this is how Linux and all the rest of them started, essentially.
Yeah. How long has this been around in this
200 trillion,
open
5
architecture?
7,453,000 and 47.5 nanoseconds. Maybe I'm wrong. Details will be in the show notes. No, I reckon about 10 years make that 15 or something. You want to take a few?
Well, it's mainly how many people are actually doing this right now, right?
It's picking up momentum. Because more and more people are contributing, more and more people are picking this up in terms of not people but companies with the DAO at their disposal in terms of money that are actually, I wouldn't say are disrupting the marketplace. But you see, funny enough, if you take a look at the website, all of the major CPU manufacturers are on there as sponsors.
Yeah, makes sense, right?
So I reckon they simply don't want to miss the train, I suppose, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Sensible. But anyway.
Any final thoughts before we wrap this up, Mr. Vischer?
Final thoughts. Yeah, so what do you reckon this will look like in 10 years' time after you launched your successful company?
Good question. I mean, it's probably fair to say that medium to long term, they will preempt MIPS in the router space, as in the embedded hardware space. And given the fact that quite a few single board computers are already using this, and links will be in the show notes, people. It's probably fair to say that I wouldn't say the days of something called the Raspberry Pi are counted, but it wouldn't surprise me if they, by the end of this decade, they would have garnered a fair market share in the single board computing space. As in the likes of the, what are they called? Banana Pis, Raspberry Pis, and all the rest of them. Because it starts essentially there. And before you know it, the hyperscalers will have picked this up. I'm almost tempted to say all of the major operating systems do support RISC-V already. You're looking at the likes of FreeBSD, Linux.
Okay.
I think even Microsoft did an experimental part of Windows to this, as in Windows, I think, what's it called? There used to be a special version that was able to run on Pis, or is able to run on ARM architectures. I think they simply took this and tried an experimental port to RISC-V, and even you can even run Plan 9 on the whole damn thing, given the corresponding configuration of an SoC. Details are on the RISC-V website. Check it out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly all this stuff is going in cycles as well, right? We had the x86's popularity, which is still kind of there, but still, Apple's making their own chips. AWS is doing some ARM stuff as well. It's there will be another. It's not as given anymore that everybody's going to be using x86, put it that way. So there may be some developments in this area as well, right?
It's interesting that, the whole world, at least underneath the hood, is running RISC architectures. Intel made the switch, I think, about 20 years ago with one of the last Pentiums, where they actually put a RISC core underneath
Wow.
a CISC shell. Exactly. You had the PowerPC architecture run for ages. I'm not going to talk about ARM because the success of ARM, especially in the embedded space, is quite heard of in terms of undisputable. And more companies are moving over, or have already moved over to this space. I reckon there are only a few architectures out there that are still pure complex instruction set computers, because when IBM made this move to the P-series and the PowerPC, they started with the mainframes, and you're looking at about
not a huge success, really, was it, the PowerPC?
Well, you see, if you take a look at the mainframe architectures that have been selling for the last 20-25 years, internally, they all run RISC architectures, as in RISC cores. They just look like architectures that have been run for the last 50 years. Underneath the hood, it's still it's all RISC.
But yeah, let's see how many. What will happen in the, let's say, the user device landscape?
Yes.
Not obviously not mobiles, but yeah.
I've yet to see the first mobile phone using RISC. People, if you own a device, if you own a smartphone that is based on RISC-V, please send mail to feedback@linuxinlaws.eu, because we would really like to hear about this.
Yeah, and interview.
Be interesting. Yes. And with that, I reckon we are almost near the boxes, right?
Almost near the boxes?
So
do tell.
So exactly, Martin.
What's happening before the post?
We don't have any feedback, sadly enough. So
are you sure?
Is there any feedback?
I remember something. Why don't you do your box? I'll look it up.
Martin, you're not supposed to do spoilers now, because yes, there was feedback, but we can't really talk about it because it's about an upcoming episode, so we cannot tease this. But what we can tease,
no, not that one.
But of course, what we can tease, Martin, is my upcoming presentation.
Oh,
yes.
Are you doing a presentation?
I'm always doing presentations, Martin.
Is it about Reddit? Oh.
No, it's not. Funny
Oh, you
enough.
don't work there anymore. Okay. I
No.
see.
Okay, people. It's really weird, but this episode will come out end of June. If you were at OpenSUSECon late May,
All
and
two
if
of
you
you.
were exactly, well, no, Martin, there were about 200.
It was in Germany, wasn't it? Right? So
It was in Germany, but there were about 200 people anyway,
Okay.
and about, I reckon, 30, 40 of them were actually at my Kubernetes presentation.
Uh-huh.
If you happen to be one of them, you already saw the teaser where I actually booted up a Kubernetes cluster on a mobile phone. So I have Kubernetes up and running, exactly, on a smartphone. If you find your way to Tübingen...
What do you actually run on? Or is it just Kubernetes itself?
No. It's no. I ran it on an Android 13 on an.
No. What are you running on Kubernetes?
What am I running on Kubernetes?
Yes.
It's a tool called kubectl. No, Martin.
Is that the thing that would run?
No, I just got this up and running just before the conference, so it's still very much WIP as a work in progress. But the idea is, what I did talk about at OpenSUSECon was actually...
You don't want to carry around any more laptops, I guess.
Exactly. No, what I demoed actually before I booted up the Kubernetes cluster on that mobile phone was actually how you run a small web server on your ordinary Kubernetes cluster in terms of what does the code base look like, how do you package it and all the rest of it.
I hope it was written in Rust as well.
No, just in Golang.
No.
just in Golang for a change. So, and I will be talking about how you set this up at Tübingen because the presentation or the proposal for that presentation has already been accepted. And if you happen to be in southern Germany on the 1st of July, which is about,
anywhere specific in southern Germany?
In Tübingen, because that's of course what Tübingen refers to. The whole thing takes place on the 1st of July in Tübingen. It's a community event. So you just show up, you just bring a cake with you.
Yeah, cake.
Or you man the barbecue, or you man the coffee place for a couple of hours, because it's probably the most community-based event in Germany that I've come across so far. As in limited amount of sponsors, it's all about everybody gives a hand, which is, wow, really up my alley. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this podcast comes out on the 27th of June. Tübingen does take place on the 1st of July in Tübingen. I don't think you even have to register. Just show up on the day in Tübingen. The link will be in the show notes. So if you have nothing better to do, I will be presenting that presentation on Saturday afternoon. So if you want to know how to set Kubernetes up on your smartphone, you don't want to miss this.
Don't.
Exactly. And with that, over to the real proxies. So Martin, what's the prox? As in pick of the week.
Yeah. Box of the week. Pick of the week. Of the week. Yeah, okay.
Fortnight, whatever.
Well, it's got to be a fortnight, isn't it? Yes.
You can make it 2 years. It doesn't make a difference. Just what do you find worth mentioning?
What I find worth mentioning is a movie called American Sniper, which I rewatched after seeing it some time ago, and still as good as it was back then.
So, care to tell the audience what this is all about?
It's about a guy who, after 9/11, decides he has some strong beliefs about protecting America. Let's put it that way. But then he finds out that actually, shooting people is not that fun after all.
It's one of these religious movies.
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
So,
okay.
It's more It's just more of a, let's say, It's not an action movie. It's more like let's say psychological drama type scenario where how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Okay, so on your scale in terms of if you can't get to sleep, you want to watch this movie? Is it like more like a one?
It's definitely not a going to sleep movie not for me.
Okay.
It's more
Fair
the
enough.
opposite. It's a very gripping story.
So it's more like a one, as in if you can't get to sleep, you don't want to watch this. In terms of a 9,
Yes,
if you can't
indeed.
get
The
to
opposite.
sleep,
Yes.
you really want to watch this, like A Handmaid's Tale or something like this. Sorry, people, if you haven't watched this, if you really can't get to sleep, this is the TV series you want to watch.
It's a movie, actually. But,
I thought it was a TV series. Okay,
well, I know.
maybe I'm wrong.
No, no.
I watched.
It's quite a few years old, actually. It's
Yes, but the thing is basically, if you watch this for half an hour, it doesn't matter if it's TV series or movie, you will fall asleep no matter what.
Well, your pops for the week. Oh.
We're just getting there in a moment, Martin.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about your pops.
No.
I'm confused.
No.
What are you talking about now?
Full disclosure, Martin is easily confused. No, I mean, if there's something that can help you with falling asleep, you want to watch The Handmaid's Tale.
Probably not listening anymore.
No, I mean, if you think our podcast is putting you to sleep, but that will take probably half an hour, The Handmaid's Tale will do the job in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Never mind if the neighbors are having arguments, if the fire brigade is doing a training outside your front door, it doesn't matter. You will fall asleep, more or less immediately. So, no medication required, just watch this.
Okay.
If I'm so inclined,
I've never watched it.
But then you fall asleep easily anyway.
It's some kind of series, isn't it?
You said it was a movie.
I thought you were talking about A Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a TV series.
Yes, a TV series. Yeah.
Exactly. And you don't have to watch the first series because you will fall asleep after about 30 minutes of the first episode.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Well, it takes a lot of time for sure.
if not within the first 10 minutes. Guaranteed.
Okay.
Anyway, now back to much more serious issues. My box of the week is a movie called Rat Race. Or The Rat Race. Details will be in the show notes.
Red or rat?
Rat Race.
Ah, okay.
Yes, as in the treadmill.
Well, the rats are small animals.
Yeah, exactly. It's ancient. It's about
known for
20
carrying the plague. Well, the fleas.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's about
carry on.
20. It's about 20 years old.
20 years old.
Yes, Mr. Cleese plays a very important role in this, of Monty Python fame, of course. I won't give away too much, but yes, it's about.
Where did you find this?
Can't disclose that, I'm afraid. It was recommended by somebody that I know very closely. Let's put it this way. It's in recommendation. Okay. Anyway.
Oh, you've not seen it before?
If I have, I probably have forgotten about it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, it doesn't. Okay.
Multiple rat races.
Yes. No, I mean it's the one with John. With I think his name is John Cleese. If I'm not completely mistaken. I might be wrong. Mr. Cleese is a very important part of it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's about a competition, and it.
Rowan Atkinson is on it as well. Correct.
Yes, and saying that this is very funny is really understating the whole fact. So if you just love humorous movies, that's the one you don't want to miss. As I said, it's ancient details within the show notes. And with that, Martin, I think we have reached the end of the episode.
Okay. I need to find out where it is watchable. I haven't seen it for years.
Maybe Netflix, maybe... What's it called? Netflix. What's it called? Oldmovies.com, no?
Is that such a thing?
I'm just making this up as I go along. I don't know. No, jokes aside. Maybe Amazon has it in its legacy movie section. I do not know. Anyway, people, I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we had recording this. Thank you for listening, and see you on the other side. This is the Linux In-Laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license type attribution share alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.